Hey, good day. Isang masayang araw na naman, no? Mga kapwa ko law students, lalo-lalo na yung mga working law students. So ngayon, part 4 na tayo sa ating basic taxation law. At this time, tapos na natin yung tatlong uploads, ano? Ito yung pang-apat natin na uploads. So, guys, kung napadaan lang kayo sa channel nito, please naman pa-subscribe and then hit na rin ng like button at saka yung notification bell para updated kayo sa lahat ng mga future uploads ko dito sa Working Law Student YouTube channel. And then pwede rin kayong mag-follow doon sa aking Facebook page, Working Law Student PH. So again, as usual, yung disclaimer natin, no? Ang video na ito ay ginawa ko as a way sa pag-aaral sa subject na ito. I am not yet a lawyer, but soon darating tayo dyan. And hindi rin ako eksperto sa field na ito. I'm just expressing my idea and paano ko na iintindihan ang subject ng basic taxation law. So, patuloy na natin, no? So, this time, we'll be talking about the principles of a sound tax system. So, pag sinabi nating principles of a sound tax system, so, these are the basic principles of a sound tax system, and ito yung sa mnemonics ko is FAT, F-A-T, fiscal adequacy, which means that the revenues that are generated by taxation should be sufficient to meet the needs of the government. Pangalawa, administrative feasibility, which means that the tax laws should be easily implemented in order to assure the smooth flow into the treasury of the fiscally adequate amounts. And lastly, theoretical justice, which means that the tax should be collected only from those that have the ability to pay. So, the canons serve as standards in order to determine whether a tax system is able to meet the purpose of objectives of taxation. So, now let's go first to the first one. Tinatawag natin na fiscal adequacy. So, fiscal adequacy means that the tax system must be able to provide revenues in order to meet the legitimate objects of the government. Stated otherwise, the taxes collected must be able to finance government expenditures and their variations. So, the sources of revenue should be sufficient to meet the varied levels of expenditure. So, kailangan mas malaki talaga yung sources of revenue natin para kaya nating gumastos, no? Kasi pag maliit yung revenue natin and then malaki yung kakailangan natin ng gastos, na sa time na yung government natin umuutang, no? Naglo-loan tayo. So, regardless of business condition and problems on economic adjustment. Thus, the tax systems or the prevailing tax measures that the state have should be able to expand in response to variations in public expenditures. Thus, if the collection for revenue is 20%, the Congress should not increase the tax rates. The problems with collection and the enforcement should not be resolved by enacting more taxes. The state should, through its executive branch, be able to enforce and implement. Actually, ang dami-daming magaganda nating mga tax laws. Ang problema yung implementation, di ba? Alam naman natin, di ba? Na minsan, malaki yung assessment sa tax, pero pinapalusot, di ba? Maraming mga ganun. Yung mayroong mga utility, yung tatawag na under the table. So, ang nangyayari, nawawala yung tax, no? Yung opportunity ng government to collect revenues, instead of collecting like 5 million, binabayad ng mga malalaki is only 3 million, no, di ba? I remember when President Duterte gives the Philippine Airlines, no, a time frame to pay the dues, their payables to the government, and yet they complied, no? Even isang beer brand din, no? So lahat sila nagko-comply because when the government wanted to enforce and collect the taxes, kailangan dapat talaga yung government prosegido sa enforcement. Kasi walang mangyayari sa mga gandang mga legislations, no? Yung mga batas kung hindi na ipapatupad ng maayos. Now, let's go to the case of itong si Chavez versus Ongpin. GR number 76778, June 6, 1990. The facts of the case that the petition seeks to declare unconstitutional Executive Order number 73, alleging that EO 73 accelerated the applicable general revision of assessment mandating an increase in real property taxes by 100% to 400% on improvements and 100% on land, and the increase in value of property results to increase of real property taxes, resulting to a sheer oppression, and that increase in the market values of real properties was only due to inflation and economic recession. Here, Chavez argues that the unreasonable increase in real property taxes brought by EO 73 amounts to a confiscation of property repugnant to the constitutional guarantee of due process. Now, the issue of this case is that should it be declared unconstitutional? Yan yung issue. Anong sabi ng Supreme Court? No, hindi. Hindi po yan unconstitutional. EO 73 merely directs that the real property values as determined by local assessors during the latest general revision of assessment shall take effect on January 1, 1987, and this is a continuing process mandated by law. Without EO 73, the basis for collection of real property taxes will still be the 1978 revision of property values. Certainly, to continue collecting real property taxes based on valuations arrived at several years ago. In this regard of the increases in the value of real properties that have occurred since then, it is not in consonance with a sound tax system. So here what the state says is that fiscal adequacy, which is one of the characteristics of a sound tax system, requires that sources of revenues must be adequate to meet government expenditures and their variations. So, dyan natin nakita na kailangan there should be fiscal adequacy. Now, let's go to administrative feasibility. Feasible means it is possible and doable. The tax system should be capable of being effectively administered and enforced with the least inconvenience to the taxpayer. The tax measures should be easily implemented in order to assure the smooth flow into the treasury of the fiscally adequate amounts. So this means that the laws should be capable of convenient, just, and effective administrations. Therefore, each tax should be clear and plain to the taxpayer, capable of uniform enforcement, convenient as to time, place, and manner of payment, and not unduly burdensome upon or discouraging to business activities. So, next is the theoretical justice. The tax should be collected on the basis of ability to pay through a progressive system of taxation. Tama sa atin, di ba? Progressive system. The higher your income, the higher the tax you're going to pay. The lower your income, the lower you're going to pay. But if your income is below the threshold, wala kang babayaran na tax diyan. Now, since a progressive system yung taxation natin, the incidence or burden of taxation should fall more on those who could afford. Klaro yan. This is termed as the ability to pay theory. Those who have more should pay more, and those who have less should pay less. Now, what happens if there is non-observance to any of the canons of a sound tax system? Anong mangyayari? Now, let's go to the case of Diaz versus Secretary of Finance, GR number 193007, July 19, 2011. This is decision in bank. The facts of the case that petitioners question the validity of imposition of VAT to the collections of tollway operators, arguing that the Congress did not intend to include toll fees within the meaning of sale of services subject to VAT, and that it was user's VAT and not a sale of services, and that imposing VAT would tax public service, and that the VAT or the value-added tax was never factored in computing toll fees. So the petitioners assert that the substantiation requirements for claiming input VAT make the VAT on tollway operations impractical of implementation. They also cited the fact that in order to claim input VAT, the name, address, and a tax identification number of the tollway user must be indicated in the VAT receipt or invoice. The manner by which the BIR intends to implement the VAT by rounding off the toll rate and putting any excess collection in an escrow account is also illegal. While the alternative of giving change to thousands of motorists in order to meet the exact toll rate would be a logistical nightmare. Thus, according to them, the value-added tax on tollway operations is not administratively feasible. Now, the issue here on this case is that, so that is the issue now. No? May toll fees collected by tollway operators be subjected to value-added tax? The Supreme Court ruled that yes, and non-observance of a canon does not render a tax imposition invalid. No? The court said that they are subject to VAT because tollway operators are franchise grantees and they do not belong to exceptions from the payment of VAT. Number two, administrative feasibility is one of the canons of a sound tax system. It simply means that the tax system should be capable of being effectively administered and enforced with the least inconvenience to the taxpayer. So, non-observance of the canon, however, will not render a tax imposition invalid except to the extent that specific constitutional or statutory limitations are impaired. Thus, even if the imposition of value-added tax on tollway operations may seem burdensome to implement, it is not necessarily invalid unless some aspect of it is shown to violate any law or the Constitution. So here, it remains to be seen how the taxing authority will actually implement the VAT on tollway operations. Any declaration by the court that the manner of its implementation is illegal or unconstitutional would be premature. So the court said that it cannot preempt the BIR's discretion on the matter absent any clear violation of law or the Constitution. For the same reason, the court cannot prematurely declare as illegal BIR RMC 63-2010. Now let's go to letter E, theory and basis of taxation. The theory of taxation is the necessity theory, which is inextricably linked with the lifeblood theory, and the basis of taxation is the benefits protection theory, also known as symbiotic relationship. So, yung theory ng taxation is lifeblood theory, yung basis ng taxation is the symbiotic relationship or the benefits protection theory. Now, let's go first to the first one, which is the necessity. The theory of taxation is based on necessity theory. So it is the theory behind the exercise of the power to tax to have emanated from necessity. For without taxes, the government cannot then fulfill its mandate of promoting the general welfare and well-being of the people. The theory of necessity discusses the acceptance that governmental existence is a necessity and performance of governmental functions redounds to the benefit of the populace in general, and the government could levy proportionate forced contribution among the populace to defray its expenditures. Okay, so that is for the necessity. That is on the theory of taxation, which is what we call as the lifeblood theory. Now, as to the ability to pay, the ability to pay theory is related to the principle of a sound tax system. Okay? Ability to pay refers to or is related to the principle of sound tax system. Theoretical justice, where the tax system should be based on a progressive tax system in which Those who have more should contribute more, and those who have less should contribute less. So yan yung ability to pay theory. Now let's go to the benefit protection. Okay, so the benefit protection theory or symbiotic relationship, this is a concept wherein the basis of taxation in the case of CIR versus ALGE 158 SCRA number 8. So the basis of taxation is the symbiotic relationship, which is the reciprocal relation of protection and support between the state and the taxpayers. The state gives protection, and for it to continue giving protection, it must be supported by taxpayers in the form of taxes. Now, these taxes are what we pay for a civilized society, because without taxes, the government would be paralyzed for lack of motive power to activate and operate it. Despite the reluctance, or despite the natural reluctance to surrender part of one's hard-earned income to the taxing authorities, every person who is able must contribute his share to the government. The government, for its part, is expected to respond in the form of tangible and intangible benefits intended to improve the lives of the people and enhance their moral and material values. So this symbiotic relationship is the rationale of taxation and should dispel the erroneous notion that it is an arbitrary method of exaction by those in the seat of power. This is also termed as the benefits received principle, where the more man enjoys the advantages of society, the more he ought to hold himself honored in contributing to those expenses, as it was in the case of Abacada versus Ermita. Now let's go to the lifeblood theory. Taxes are the lifeblood of the government, for without taxes, the government can neither exist nor endure. Without revenue raised from taxation, the government will not survive, resulting in detriment to society. Without taxes, the government would be paralyzed for lack of motive power to activate and operate it. Now, the concepts that flow from lifeblood theory is that number one, collection of taxes may not be enjoined by injunction. This is true because of the what we call as the no injunction principle. But we have to remember there are exceptions to this no injunction principle, which we are going to tackle later. The taxes could not be subject of compensation and set off. A valid tax may result in destruction of the taxpayer's property because it is part of the power to destroy. And taxation is unlimited and a plenary power. So that is the under the concepts that flow from lifeblood theory. Now let's go to the no injunction rule based on its exemption. So the general rule is that collection of taxes may not be enjoined by injunction. Taxes, being the lifeblood of the government, should be collected promptly. No court shall have the authority to grant an injunction to restrain the collection of any internal revenue tax, fee, or charge imposed by the National Internal Revenue. Now, as to the exceptions, this is what I mean earlier, that there are exceptions. Number one, local taxes can be enjoined by the courts. So the court can enjoin local taxes. Number two, CTA or the CTA law, no? Or the Court of Tax Appeals Law, RA 1125 as amended RA 9282 paragraph 4, and Supreme Court or constitutional basis. Now let's go first to the number one, the no injunction rule, the exception. In the case of Angeles City versus Angeles City Electric Electric Corporation, GR number 166134. So the facts of the case here is that Angeles City Electric Corp, a legislative franchise holder for the generation and distribution of electric light, heat, and power for sale in Angeles City, Pampanga by virtue of RA 4079 pursuant to Section 3-A. So the Angeles City Electric Corporation's payment of franchise tax was in lieu of all taxes, fees, and assessments. So, by virtue of Local Government Code, Angeles City enacted the Revised Revenue Code of Angeles City, or the RRCAC, which now imposed tax on businesses enjoying franchise in December 23, 1993. Now, in 2004, City Treasurer issued a notice of the assessment on AEC for payment of business tax, license fee, and other charges since 1993 to 2004 in the total amount of 94 million plus. AEC protested such, arguing it is exempt. AEC filed with the Regional Trial Court a petition for declaratory relief. Then the city treasurer levied on the real properties of AEC, which then prompted the latter to file a motion for issuance of TRO and a writ of preliminary injunction to enjoin Angeles City from levying and selling the properties. RTC issued a TRO and the writ of preliminary injunction. This was met with a motion for dissolution filed by the petitioners. Now, the issue of this case that did RTC gravely abuse its discretion in issuing the writ of preliminary injunction. Meron bang abuse dito sa RTC na part kung bakit sila nagbigay ng writ of preliminary injunction? Sabi ng Supreme Court, no. So, as the rule said, local taxes can be enjoined by the courts. The Local Government Code does not specifically prohibit an injunction enjoining the collection of taxes. A principle deeply embedded in our jurisprudence is that taxes, being the lifeblood of the government, should be collected promptly, without unnecessary hindrance or delay. In line with this principle, the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997 expressly provides that no court shall have the authority to grant an injunction to restrain the collection of any national internal revenue fee or tax, fee, or charge imposed by the code. An exception to this rule obtains only when, number one, in the opinion of the Court of Tax Appeals, the collection thereof may jeopardize the interest of the government and or the taxpayer. The situation, however, is different in the case of the collection of local taxes, as there is no express provision in the Local Government Code prohibiting courts from issuing an injunction to restrain local governments from collecting taxes. Nevertheless, it must be noted, or it must be emphasized, that although there is no express prohibition in the Local Government Code, injunctions enjoining the collection of local taxes are frowned upon. Courts, therefore, should exercise extreme caution in issuing such injunctions. Now, number two exception is that the CTA law, Section 11, who may appeal, mode of appeal, and the effect of appeal. No appeal taken to the CTA from the decision of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue or the Commissioner of Customs or the Regional Trial Court, provincial, city, or municipal treasurer, or the Secretary of Finance, the Secretary of Trade and Industry, or the Secretary of Agriculture, as the case may be, shall suspend the payment, levy, distraint, and or sale of any property of the taxpayer for the satisfaction of his tax liability as provided by existing law, provided, however, that when, in the opinion of the court, the collection by the aforementioned government agencies may jeopardize the interest of the government and or the taxpayer, the court, any stage of the proceeding, may suspend the said collection and require the taxpayer either to deposit the amount claimed or to file a surety bond for not more than double the amount with the court. So, CTA can suspend tax collection. The provisions of RA 1125 authorizes CTA to issue an injunction to prohibit BIR from collecting tax and is considered as an exception to the no injunction rule under Section 218 of the National Internal Revenue Code. Now, there are conditions to the issuance. The CTA may enjoin collection of taxes, A, if in its opinion, the same may jeopardize the interest of the government and or the taxpayer, and B, in this instance, the court may require the taxpayer either to deposit the amount claimed for file a surety bond or file a surety bond for not more than double the amount with the court. Okay, so the number 3 exception is that the Supreme Court, or shall we call it the constitutional basis, while not mentioned, Dumondon submits that the Supreme Court, being the court constitutionally vested with judicial powers, may enjoin the collection of taxes under its general judicial power, but it should be apparent that the source of the power is not statutory but constitutional. Now let's go to strict construction. General rule: no person or property is subject to taxation unless within the terms or plain import of a taxing of statute. In case of doubt, tax statutes are construed strictly against the government and liberally in favor of the taxpayer. It should be against the government because it's the government who's levying the tax. And taxes being burdens, they are not to be presumed beyond what the statute expressly and clearly declares. Now, there is also an exception to this general rule. The rule of strict construction as against government is not applicable where the language of the tax statute is plain and there is no doubt as to the legislative intent. In such case, the words are given their ordinary meaning. So no need for statutory construction. Verba legis. Tax statutes are to receive reasonable construction with a view to carrying out their purpose and intent. They should not be construed as to permit the taxpayer to easily evade payment of tax. And lastly, a tax statute should be construed to avoid possibilities of tax evasion. Now, as to the tax exemption and exclusion, the general rule is that exemptions are not favored and are construed strictly semi juris against the taxpayer. Now, taxation is the rule. Exemption is the exception. Remember this one. Taxation is the rule. Exemption is the exception. Whoever claims exemption must be able to justify his claim or right thereto. Claims for refund partake of the nature of tax exemptions and will not be allowed unless granted in the most explicit and categorical language. So, exception: when the law itself expressly provides for a liberal construction, that is, in case of doubt, it shall be resolved in favor of exemption. Exemption in favor of government agencies, for they are generally exempt from taxes. Exemption refers to religious, charitable, and educational institutions, and the express mention or clear legislative intent that the rule on strict construction does not apply. Now let's go to the doctrines in taxation. Number 1, prospectivity. We all know that prospectivity of laws was already discussed to us in our constitutional law, right? So the general rule is that tax laws do not have retroactive application. Okay? So tax laws do not have any retroactive application. To give them retroactive application would violate the due process rights of the taxpayer, who should know his obligations to be able to comply them. The public need must exist at the time of the enactment of the tax measure. Thus, the previously assessed and demanded tax may still be collected because the repeal is to be construction as exemption that must be strictly construed. So, that is very clear. Exception, unless the language of statute clearly provides. So, if it is clear in the language, so, well, there is exception. Now, let's go to the case of CIR versus Acosta. GR number 154068 in 2007. The facts of the case is that Rosemary Acosta is an employee of Intel for year 1996. She was assigned to a foreign country. Intel withheld the taxes due on her compensation income and remitted to BIR $308,000. In October of 1997, Rosemary Acosta filed an amended return where she indicated overpayment of around 358,000. So in April 15, 1999, claiming that the income taxes withheld and paid by Intel resulted to an overpayment of 340,000, a petition for review was filed with the Court of Tax Appeal. The CIR moved to dismiss the petition for failure of Acosta to file the mandatory written claim for refund before the CIR. The Court of Tax Appeal ruled against Acosta for such failure to file, but the Court of Appeals then reversed, ruling that the filing of amended return was sufficient compliance with a written claim for refund. The CIR also argues that an amended return showing an overpayment does not constitute the written claim for refund as required under the old tax code of 1993. He claims that an actual written claim for refund is necessary before suit for recovery may proceed. On her case, Acosta argues that the filing of amended return indicating an overpayment constitutes as a written claim for refund under the new 1997 tax code. So, the applicable law on refund of taxes pertaining to the 1996 compensation income is Section 230 of the old tax code, which was the law then in effect, and not Section 204 of the new tax code, which was effective starting only on January 1, 1998. Now, the issue in this case is that can the 1997 tax code apply retroactively? The Supreme Court said no. Prospectivity of laws. Okay, so the decision of the court is that the court finds that it cannot give retroactive application to Section 204C. We have to stress that tax laws are prospective in operation unless the language of the statute clearly provides otherwise. Thus, the old tax code prevails. Thus, a written claim is required. So, as well said finally, the court cannot agree with the Court of Appeals finding that the nature of the instant case calls for the application of remedial laws. Revenue statutes are substantive laws and in no sense must their application be equated with that of remedial laws. So as well said in a prior case, revenue laws are not intended to be liberally construed, considering that taxes are the lifeblood of the government, and in Holmes' memorable metaphor, the price we pay for civilization. Tax laws must be faithfully and strictly implemented. Now, let's go to imprescriptibility. So, number one, prospectivity. So, tax laws cannot take effect retroactively. And now, imprescriptibility. General rule, the right of the government to collect taxes is imprescriptible because the very existence of the state depends upon the exercise of power of taxation. Where the government has not by express statutory provision provided a limitation upon its right to assess unpaid taxes, such rights is imprescriptible. But since there is a general rule, there is also an exception. Statutes may, however, provide for a prescriptive period for the collection of particular kinds of taxes in order to respect the due process rights of the taxpayers. So, yan yung clear na meron pa ring exception. Now, let's go to the case. So, the case of CIR versus Philippine Global Communication, GR number 167146. Okay, so that's the case. So, let's go to the case of, again, CIR versus Philippine Global Communication. The facts of the case that the Philippine Global Communication filed its annual ITR or income tax return for taxable year 1990 on April 15, 1991. In 1992, the BIR examined the books of account and other accounting records of the respondent as to its income tax liability. Now, in 1994, respondent received a preliminary assessment notice or PAN for deficiency of income tax of 118,271,672, inclusive of the surcharge, interest, and penalty. A formal protest was made against the assessment, alleging it was invalid for lack of factual and legal basis. The formal protest was filed in 1994 on May. Now, on October 16, 2002, more than 8 years after assessment was issued, the Council received from CIR a final decision denying the protest and affirming the assessment. The Court of Tax Appeal ruled that right of CIR to collect the right of CIR to collect has prescribed pursuant to Section 269 of Tax Code of 1977. Now, the issue of this case is that whether or not CIR's right to collect alleged deficiency income tax is barred by prescription under Section 296 letter C of the Tax Code of 1977. 1977. Now, the Supreme Court said yes. Okay? The assessment in this case was presumably issued on 14 April 1994 since the respondent did not dispute the CIR's claim. Therefore, the BIR had until April 13, 1997. However, as there was no warrant of distraint and or levy served on the respondents nor any judicial proceedings initiated by the BIR, the earliest attempt of the BIR to collect the tax due based on this assessment was when it filed its answer in CTA in case number 6568 on January 9, 2003, which was several years beyond the 3-year prescriptive period. Thus, the CIR is now prescribed from collecting the assessed tax. The provisions on prescription in the assessment and collection of national internal revenue taxes became law upon the recommendation of the Tax Commissioner of the Philippines. The report submitted by the Tax Commission clearly states that these provisions on prescription should be enacted to benefit and protect the taxpayers. Now, it's worthy to be known that under the former tax law, the right of the government to collect the tax does not prescribe. However, in fairness to the taxpayer, the government should be stopped from collecting the tax where it failed to make the necessary investigation and assessment within 5 years after the filing of the return, and where it failed to collect the tax within 5 years from the date of assessment thereof. Just as the government is interested in the stability of its collections, so also are the taxpayers entitled to an assurance that they will not be subjected to further investigation for tax purposes after the expiration of a reasonable period of time. In a number of cases, the court has also clarified that the statute of limitations on the collection of taxes should benefit both the government and the taxpayers. In these cases, the court further illustrated the harmful effects that the delay in the assessment and collection of taxes inflicts upon taxpayers. Now, the biggest question is imprescriptibility of taxation be present? Pwede ba na yung imprescriptibility of taxation be present? Well, one of our professors told us that it could. Number one, when there is fraud involved, or we call it the fraudulent return. Number two, there is failure to file the income tax return, or the income tax return filed is false, or we call it as a false return. And lastly, if the taxpayer did not file a tax return. This is because the running of the 10-year period will start to run from the discovery. Okay, so yun yung sabi ng professor namin. So, let's go to double taxation. Is double taxation a constitutional or inherent limitation? So, a double taxation, it is a constitutional one. It is not an inherent limitation because the power to tax is plenary, all-encompassing, and unlimited. Okay, so, but not all double taxation is illegal. It is important to point out that double taxation to be illegal must refer to a direct double taxation, or also known as obnoxious double taxation. Thus, if the double taxation is a direct duplicate taxation, then it is a valid defense against a tax measure. The tax measure would be nullified for being unconstitutional for violating the Equal Protection Clause. So, there are two forms of double taxation. Number one, we call it as the direct duplicate taxation or direct double taxation. So, or we call it also as the illegal double taxation. And the second one is the indirect duplicate taxation or indirect double taxation. Now, let's look at this table. Now, indirect duplicate taxation, it is a valid defense against the legality of tax measure. While in the indirect duplicate taxation, it is not a valid defense against the legality of tax measure. Again, for direct duplicate taxation, also termed as double taxation in its strict sense, while the indirect duplicate taxation, it's also termed as double taxation in its broad sense. Now, the direct duplicate taxation is void for being unconstitutional as it violates the Equal Protection Clause, while the indirect duplicate taxation, it is not necessarily void. Now, what are the elements of a duplicate or direct duplicate taxation? Number one, subject matter is taxed twice. Number two, for the same purpose, by the same taxing authority within the same jurisdiction during the same tax period, and taxes are the same kind in character. And it should be the following elements are all present. While in the indirect duplicate taxation, absence of one of the foregoing elements renders the double taxation an indirect one. Now, what is direct duplicate taxation? Here, the taxpayer is taxed twice. So, it violates the equal protection as well as uniformity and equality of protection clauses of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, resulting to the nullification of tax laws. Consequent, there could only be one tax collected. So, double taxation means taxing the same property twice when it should be taxed only once. That is taxing the same person twice by the same jurisdiction for the same thing. It is obnoxious when the taxpayer is taxed twice when it should be but once. So, let's now go to the case of, to emphasize this fully, the case of City of Manila versus Coca-Cola Bottlers, GR number 181845. Now, the facts of the case is that Coca-Cola Bottlers has been paying City of Manila local business tax only under Section 14 of the Tax Ordinance 7794, but is exempted from Section 21 of the same ordinance. Now, in February 25, 2000, City of Manila approved Tax Ordinance 7988, amending Section 14 by increasing tax rates applicable. Section 21 removed the exemption provision. Now, let us read what is Section 14. Section 14 says that tax on manufacturers, assemblers, and other processors, there is hereby imposed a graduated tax on manufacturers, assemblers, repackers, processors, brewers, distillers, rectifiers, and compounders of liquors, distilled spirits, and wines, or manufacturers of any article of commerce of whatever kind or nature. While yung Section 21, it says that tax on businesses subject to the excise, value-added, or percentage taxes under the National Internal Revenue Code on any of the following businesses and articles of commerce subject to excise, value-added, or percentage taxes under the NIRC, hereinafter referred to as amended, a tax of 50% of 1% per annum on the gross sales or receipts of the preceding calendar year is hereby imposed. So, it said also that provided that all registered businesses in the City of Manila that are already paying the aforementioned tax shall be exempted from payment thereof. But in the new ordinance, it was removed. This last clause was removed under the new ordinance. So, take note that this tax ordinance number 7988 was amended by 8011. These were declared null and void by the Supreme Court for being violative of the local government code. However, before such declaration of nullity, City of Manila has already assessed Coca-Cola on the basis of Section 21, and it was assessed for deficiency local business taxes, penalties, and interest in the amount of 18.5 million. So, the Coca-Cola, the respondent, filed a protest arguing that the said amendment had amount to double taxation as it was taxed twice by Section 14 and Section 21. City of Manila argued that there is no double taxation because in Section 14, respondent is taxed as a manufacturer, and second, it is being taxed as a business subject to excise tax or percentage tax. Now, the issue of this case is that whether the enforcement of Section 21 constitutes double taxation. The Supreme Court said yes, it is a double taxation. So the ruling of the court is that prior to Tax Ordinance 7988 as amended by Ordinance number 8011, Coca-Cola was never assessed with Section 21 due to the clear and unambiguous provision of Section 21 of Tax Ordinance number 7794 exempts from the payment of the local business tax imposed by said section businesses that are already paying such tax under the sections of the same tax ordinance. The said proviso, however, was deleted from Section 21 of Tax Ordinance number 7794 by Tax Ordinances number 7988 and number 8011. Note also that the pronouncement by the Supreme Court in the Coca-Cola case that Tax Ordinance number 7988 and the Tax Ordinance number 8011 were null and void and without legal effect. Then Section 21 of the Tax Ordinance number 7794 as it has been previously worded with its exempting proviso is back in effect. Now, accordingly, the respondent should not have been subjected to the local business tax under Section 21 of the Tax Ordinance number 7794 since it was already paying the local business tax under Section 14 of the same ordinance. So the petitioners obstinately ignored the exempting proviso in Section 21 of the Tax Ordinance number 7794 to their own detriment. Said exempting proviso was precisely included in said section so as to avoid double taxation. Kaya, yun yung nangyari dito. Following the deletion, petitioners began assessing respondent for local business tax under Section 21 of the Tax Ordinance. Yun yung nangyari. No? So, if we could look at this one here, nagkaroon ng double taxation talaga in this case. So, who could exercise double taxation? Means taxing the same person. Taxing the same property twice when it should be taxed only once. That is taxing the same person twice by the same jurisdiction for the same thing. It is obnoxious when the taxpayer is taxed twice when it should be but once. Otherwise, described as direct duplicate taxation, the two taxes must be imposed on the same subject matter for the same purpose by the same taxing authority within the same jurisdiction during the same taxing period, and taxes must be of the same kind or character. So, how do we eliminate what we call as the double taxation? So, paano ba natin ma-eliminate itong double taxation na ito? So, here, there are modes of eliminating double taxation. And the following are the methods for easing the economic burden of double taxation. Okay, number one, tax treaties, which exempts foreign nationals from local taxation and local nationals from foreign taxation under the principle of reciprocity. Number two, we have also tax credits, where foreign taxes are allowed as deductions from local taxes that are due to be paid, and tax deduction, allowing foreign taxes as deduction from the taxable gross income. And number four, tax reduction of the Philippine income taxes. Now, let's go first to tax treaties. Now, how do we define tax treaty? Okay, so tax treaty is an arrangement entered into between sovereign states for purpose of eliminating double taxation on income and capital, preventing fiscal evasion, promoting mutual trade and investment, and according fair and equitable tax treatment to foreign resident or nationals. So, the main purpose of this tax treaty is that to avoid international double taxation. Now, tax treaties, the purpose is, again, this international agreement is to reconcile the national fiscal legislations of the contracting parties in order to help the taxpayer avoid simultaneous taxation in two different jurisdictions. So, more precisely, the purposes are, number one, tax conventions are drafted with a view towards the elimination of international juridical double taxation, which is defined as the imposition of comparable taxes in two or more states of the same taxpayer in respect of the same subject matter and for identical periods. And number two, encourage free flow of goods and services and the movement of capital, technology, and persons between countries, conditions deemed vital in creating robust and dynamic economies. In the case of CIR versus SC Johnson and Son in 1999. Important that for purposes of international juridical double taxation, the double taxation here is the indirect duplicate taxation, which is the valid form because it cannot be considered as direct duplicate because there is no same taxing authority. Because in this instance, there are two or more states involved in a tax treaty and thus different taxing authorities. As a treaty, it has the binding under Pacta Sunt Servanda rule and entered into by the President, concurred by the Senate. So, yan yung clear dyan, no? So, and also, the most favored nation clause in the tax treaties is that which is to grant the contracting party treatment of not less favorable than which has been or may be granted to the most favored nation among other countries. The most favored nation is intended to establish the principle of equality of international treatment by providing that the citizens or subjects of the contracting nations may enjoy privileges accorded by either party to those of the most favored nation. Now, let's go to the case here of CIR versus SC Johnson. Okay, so the facts of the case is that SC Johnson, a domestic corporation, entered into agreement with SC Johnson and Son USA, which is a non-domestic corporation, into a license agreement where SC Johnson Domestic is given the right to use the trademark, patents, and technology owned by the latter, including the right to manufacture, package, and distribute the products covered by the agreement. SC Johnson, the domestic corporation, was obliged to pay SC Johnson USA royalties based on a percentage of net sales and subject to the same 25% withholding tax on royalty payment. Now, SC Johnson filed with International Tax Affairs Division of BIR a claim for refund over overpaid withholding tax, arguing that the royalties paid subject only to 10% withholding tax pursuant to the most favored nation clause of the RP-US Treaty in relation to the RP-West Germany Tax Treaty. But the BIR did not act, thus it went to the Court of Tax Appeal, which issued a tax credit certificate for the overpaid withholding tax on royalty payments. Then, the Commissioner on Internal Revenue filed with the Court of Appeals a petition for review, which was dismissed. Now, the Court of Tax Appeals found that the concession tax rate of 10% applies for the taxes imposed upon royalties in the RP-US Tax Treaty and in RP Germany Tax Treaty are paid in similar circumstances. Now, the issue of the case is that, is the Court of Tax Appeal correct in finding similarity in circumstances to merit the 10% withholding tax rate in favor of SC Johnson? The Supreme Court said no. The RPUS and RP West Germany treaties are dissimilar. So meaning hindi sila pareha, no? They are dissimilar. So tax treaties to avoid double taxation, the RPUS treaties is just one of a number of bilateral treaties which the Philippines has entered into for the avoidance of double taxation. The purpose of these international agreements is to reconcile the national fiscal legislations of the contracting parties in order to help the taxpayer avoid simultaneous taxation in two different jurisdictions. So, more precisely, the law conventions are drafted with a view towards the elimination of international juridical double taxation, which is defined as the imposition of comparable taxes in two or more states on the same taxpayer in respect of the same subject matter and for identical periods. So the apparent rationale for doing away with double taxation is to encourage the free flow of goods and services and also the movement of capital, technology, and persons between countries, conditions deemed what is vital in creating a robust and dynamic economies. So, double taxation usually takes place when a person is a resident of a contracting state and derives income or owns capital in the other contracting state, and both states impose tax on what income or capital. So, how does tax treaties eliminate the double taxation? In order to eliminate double taxation, a tax treaty resorts to several methods. Number one, first, it sets out the respective rights to tax of the state of source or situs for the place of taxation, and of the state of residence with regard to certain classes of income or capital. In some cases, an exclusive right to tax is conferred on one of the contracting states. However, for other items of income or capital, both states are given the right to tax, although the amount of tax that may be imposed by the state of source is limited. And number two, the second method for the elimination of double taxation applies whenever the state of source is given a full or limited right to tax together with the state of residence. So in this case, the treaties make it incumbent upon the state of residence to allow relief in order to avoid double taxation. So take note that there are two methods of relief. Letter A, exemption, and the letter B, credit. So both are exemption method and the credit method. Okay. So under the exemption method, the income or capital which is taxable in the state of source or situs is exempted in the state of residence. Although in some instances, it may be taken into account in determining rate of tax applicable to the taxpayer's remaining income or capital. This is what we call as the tax deduction method. While the second one is the credit method. Although the income or capital which is taxed in the state of source is still taxable in the state of residence, the tax paid in the former is credited against the tax rebate in the latter, or we call it as the tax credit method. So, the basic differences between these two methods is that in the exemption method, the focus is on the income or capital itself, whereas the credit method focuses upon the tax. In negotiating tax treaties, remember that the underlying rationale for reducing the tax rate is that the Philippines will give up a part of the tax in the expectation that the tax given up for this particular investment is not taxed by the other country. Thus, the petitioner correctly opined that the phrase royalties paid under similar circumstances in the most favored nation clause of the RP-US tax treaty necessarily contemplated circumstances that are tax related. So now, in the case here, the state of source is the Philippines because the royalties are paid for the right to use property or rights. Sample, the trademarks, patents, and technology, which is located within the Philippines. So, the United States is the state of residence since the taxpayer, SC Johnson and Son USA, is based there. So, under the RP-US Treaty, Tax Treaty, the state of residence and the state of source are both permitted to tax the royalties with a restraint on the tax that may be collected by the state of source. Furthermore, the method employed to give relief from double taxation is the allowance of a tax credit to citizens or residents of the United States. So, in an appropriate amount based upon the taxes paid or accrued to the Philippines. So, against the United States tax, but such amount shall not exceed the limitations provided by United States law for the taxable year. So, under the Article 13 thereof, the Philippines may impose one of three rates: the 25% of the gross amount of the royalties, 15% when the royalties are paid by a corporation registered in the Philippine Board of Investment and engaged in preferred areas of activities, or the lowest rate of Philippine tax that may be imposed on royalties of the same kind paid under similar circumstances to a resident of a third state. So, third state here being Germany. So, given the purpose underlying the tax treaties and the rationale for the most favored nation clause, the concessional tax rate of 10% provided for in the RP Germany tax treaty should apply only if the taxes imposed upon royalties in the RP US tax treaty and in the RP Germany tax treaty are paid under similar circumstances. This would mean that the private respondent must prove that the RP US tax treaty grants similar tax reliefs to residents of the United States in respect of the taxes imposable upon royalties earned from sources within the Philippines as those allowed to their German counterparts under the RP Germany tax treaty. So, the RP US and RP West Germany tax treaties do not contain similar provisions on tax crediting. So, based on Article 24 of the RP Germany tax treaty, expressly allows crediting against German income and corporation tax of 20% of the gross amount of royalties paid under the law of the Philippines. So, on the other hand, Article 23 of the RP-US Tax Treaty, which is the counterpart provision with respect to relief for double taxation, does not provide for similar crediting of 20% of the gross amount of royalties paid. So, there are similarity of circumstances of payment of taxes required to enjoy most favored nation clause. So both Article 13 of the RP-US Tax Treaty and Article 12, Paragraph 2b of the RP-West Germany Tax Treaty speaks of tax on royalties for the use of trademark, patent, and technology. So it's very clear. So the entitlement of the 10% rate by US firms, despite the absence of a matching credit, which is 20% for royalties, would derogate from the design behind the most favored nation clause to grant equality of international treatment, since the tax burden laid upon the income of the investor is not the same in the two countries. So similarly, the similarity in the circumstances of payment of taxes is a condition for the enjoyment of most favored nation treatment, precisely to underscore the need for equality of treatment. Therefore, the Supreme Court agree with petitioner that since the RP-US tax treaty does not give a matching tax credit of 20% for the taxes paid to the Philippines on royalties as allowed under the RP-West Germany tax treaty, private respondent cannot be deemed entitled to the 10% rate granted under the latter treaty for the reason that there is no payment of taxes on royalties under similar circumstances. So that's the ruling. Now let's go to tax credits. Now, tax credits is where foreign taxes are allowed as deductions from local taxes that are due to be paid. In the case of CIR versus SC Johnson, remember we discussed this case a while ago. Tax credit method is applied where although the income or capital which is taxed in the state of source is still taxable in the state of residence, the tax paid in the former is credit directly reduced, no? Meaning if you have this tax credit against the tax levied in the latter. Tax credit generally refers to an amount that is subtracted directly from one's total tax liability and allowance against the tax itself or a deduction from what is owed. So sabi nga natin, diba, on the part of this lecture series, yung tax credit is doon siya iaawas after, no? After the tax has been computed or assessed. So, i-deduct siya sa final assessment mo ng tax. Well, yung tax deduction naman, doon siya iaawas sa gross mo. Okay? So, ang magkaiba sa dalawa, sa tax credit is that bababa yung tax na babayaran mo, while doon sa tax deduction naman is bababa yung income na taxable mo. Okay? So, that is clear in both cases. So, a tax credit reduces the tax due, including, whenever applicable, the income tax that is determined after applying the corresponding tax rates to taxable income. Now, let's go to tax deduction. Tax deduction allows foreign taxes as deduction from the taxable gross income. As in the case of CIR versus SC Johnson, remember that the tax deduction method, also referred to as the exemption method in that case, is when the income or capital which is taxable in the state of source is exempted in the state of residence. Although, in some instances, it may be taken into account in determining the rate of tax applicable to the taxpayer's remaining income or capital. This is done by using the tax deduction method. So the tax deduction method is a subtraction from income tax for purposes or an amount that is allowed by law to reduce income prior to the application of tax rate to compute the amount of the tax which is due. A tax deduction reduces the income that is subject to tax in order to arrive at a taxable income. Now, let us look at this table. So, yung tax credit is a direct reduction on the tax liability itself, while yung tax deduction is a deduction on the taxable income for tax purposes. Di ba? Kasi yung tax credit, iaawas siya after makompute yung taxes payable mo. No? So if you've been assessed with 5 million, doon iaawas yung tax payable, yung tax credit mo. In return, bababa yung tax na babayaran mo, yung final tax, no, liability. Well, sa tax deduction naman, ang i-deduct mo na siya doon sa gross sales mo. So, in return, yung effect niya is bababa yung taxable income mo. Yung bago ka computan ng tax rate, bababa siya kasi iaawas mo na yung tax deduction. Now, on tax credit also, it focuses upon the tax. While on tax deduction, it focuses on income or capital itself. Now, in tax credit, applied after applying the determination of the corresponding tax rates to the taxable income, while in tax deduction, it's applied directly to the income that is taxable. So, and the last part of this series, part 4, is the tax reduction. Now, tax reduction is more of a legislative measure, and this would mean that the Congress would enact a new law that would reduce the tax liabilities of a taxpayer or the tax rate or tax base of a particular measure. So, yan yung last part ng upload na ito. So, again, sana may natutunan kayo. This is part, again, ng ating basic taxation law series, and all of these parts na ating in-upload is part ito ng prelim exam, no? Usually ng basic taxation law. So again, maraming salamat sa panonood at pakikinig. Again, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Working Law Student PH. Please click the like button and also hit the notification bell, then share na rin, no? Doon sa mga kakilala nyo, sa mga core group nyo, no? Mga kakampi nyo, yung mga ka-squad nyo sa law school. And also available din ang ating upload dito sa ating Facebook page, no? We have also the Working Law Student BH Facebook page. So please paki-follow na rin po. Yan lang po. God bless and maraming salamat sa inyong lahat.